Hey, welcome back to Mr. Slover's Maths. Today we're going to talk about graphing in slope-intercept form. So this top part, the warm-up, is just getting us ready to talk about the slope, which is your rise over the run, which we're going to use. So example 1 says, identify the slope and y-intercept of the graphs below. And in red, I said we're going to pick 2 points, and we're going to count for the slope, because our slope, when it's already graphed, is just rise over run. Let's make it easy. We don't have to do anything complicated. We can just count because it's graphed. Now you need to pick 2 points, and those 2 points need to be integers. We don't want decimals. So what I mean is this point here is at -1, -2. This is at 0, 1. Those are integers. Okay. It's very clear what they are. Like if I go somewhere in between, it may not be -1, it may be -1.2, -1.3, we don't know. So that's why you're going for integers. So I picked my 2 points, and it doesn't matter whether you start with this point or whether you start with this point, the end result will be the same. I always go from left to right, just like I would read, or just like we do, and we follow the order of operations in a mathematical statement, go left to right, and then I just count. Rise goes first, so I go up 1, 2, 3, and I went right 1. Going up is positive, going right is positive, so my slope is 3 over 1, or 3. My b, which is my y-intercept, is where it crosses the y-axis. So it crosses the y-axis right there at 1. And then b and c are very similar. Put 2 points on there, so I count. This time I had to go down 2 and then right 5 to get from this point to this point. I went down 2, right 5. So because it's down, that's positive, or sorry, that's negative. Going to the right is positive. So -2/5, leave it as a fraction, and then my y-intercept was -3. So that was practice on identifying the slope and the y-intercept. Our slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. Similar to what we just did here, we talked about the slope and the y-intercept. Now we're actually going to start writing an equation. And that's what example 2 says. Write an equation in slope-intercept form with the following information. So it may look confusing because I got a bunch of red marks all over on example 2, but that's there to help us and to talk about different examples when we get there. So the first one says m is 3/4 and b is 7. M is my slope, so up here it says y equals mx plus b. M is my slope. I'm substituting m, 3/4, in where I see m. B is 7, where I see the letter b in the equation. I plug in 7. So y equals 3/4 x plus 7. Now notice over here I said make sure to add x to your slope. Okay, now obviously there's different circumstances where x does not have to be there, because we all know math has those weird tricks. But for purposes of example 2 and what we're doing today, x is always going to be with your slope. Letter B, I have slope of -1 and a y-intercept of 2. So I write my equation, -x plus 2. Now in red, I have got this arrow, so this is commonly written this way. So most of the time, I'm going to write it like this, or other math teachers are going to write it like this. That doesn't mean it has to look like that. You could write it like this, y equals -1x plus 2. Same thing with the other 3 examples that I have over here for letters C, E, and F. There are 2 different ways that you could write that equation. Okay, the top one here, the top one here, and the bottom one here are the common ways that these equations are written, but the other one I listed is also true. So let's look at letter F. My slope is 1, my y-intercept is 0. Remember, 0 is a value. It means I have 0, I have nothing of some quantity or some item. So y equals 1x plus 0, right? I'm following exactly what it says. M is 1, b is 0, substituted in. However, you're probably going to see teachers, myself included, just write it as y equals x. And that's all it is. Okay? But both of those work. Example 3. So I'm combining what I did in the previous two examples. I identified the slope and the y-intercept in the first example. We wrote the equation using the m and the b. So now I'm just combining it. Now I'm looking at a graph, and from that graph, I'm able to write an equation based off that. So you need to pick 2 points if they're not already picked, and we talked about it. They have to be integers. So my slope here is down 1 to the right 5, so negative 1/5 crosses the y-axis at 4. I plug in my information, and I get y equals negative 1/5 x plus 4. Likewise for B and C. Identifying the slope, the y-intercept, and just plugging it into my equation. So now I'm combining everything. Now I have to graph it. So identify the slope and y-intercept, and then graph. So I'm identifying my slopes as negative 1, because it's negative x, negative 1 over 1. I am choosing to always write it as a fraction. You don't have to, but I would suggest doing that since we do have to graph it. So I'm always going to write it as a fraction. That negative 1 tells me I'm going down 1, and then the positive 1 in the denominator tells me I'm going to the right. But I need a starting point. So first, I need to find my y-intercept. In this case, it's positive 4. So on the y-axis, I put a point, and I go down 1, right 1. Down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1, and I connect my dots. Similar for B and C. The red arrows are optional if you want to put that on your notes. That's just to help me graph it. So the positive 2 told me to go up. Positive 5 told me to go right. The negative 2 told me to go down. The positive 1 told me to go right. So when you graph, make sure you identify the m and the b, the slope and the y-intercept, and then that will help you graph. Always graph your b value first, your y-intercept, and then from there, use your slope.